Hello, and welcome to my spoiler review for Jurassic World Rebirth. Well, I have some very interesting observations that I'm excited to share with you now that we can really talk about the movie. All right, so as I said in my non-spoiler review, I felt this movie did a little more telling than showing, particularly when it came to preaching about business versus science. But still, there were two lines that I really kind of liked. The first was Jonathan Bailey arguing that medicine shouldn't be patented, but open sourced for all, which I very much agree with, which is why government funding is so important for science. Many things, but that's one of the reasons that the government invests millions, I think tens to hundreds of millions of dollars in science. But the other line I liked was when Bailey asks why InGen didn't euthanize the monsters that it created. Rupert Friend's corporate hack explains it. He gives the Zazzy argument that with mutant dinosaurs costing some ridiculous amount of money, I think it was it had a 7 in front of it. I wasn't sure if it was 70 or 700. I don't remember exactly. But he says, who wants that loss on their books? Just hide it in R&D, in that area. I mean, if you euthanized it though, wouldn't it still just be an R&D expense? I guess it would be a write-down because it wasn't still operational. I would counter that the cost of securing these monsters, feeding them, the liability insurance. I mean, I don't even know how InGen was still able to get insurance towards the end of its run there because it's out of business when this movie starts. Well, after the early opening scene. But then also the potential payouts if employees and or civilians get injured. I think that makes the case for euthanization. What are we doing here? Yes, Jurassic World Rebirth misses the forest for the trees. I think that was a very good way to describe this movie. We're like, do you want to talk dinosaurs? And then you're like, wait a minute, I thought we were going to talk about dinosaurs. And you're like, and you are, technically. But the purpose of the Jurassic franchise is to present the audience with the unique mix of horror and wonder when it comes to living dinosaurs. Sure, you can have intellectual discussions. And you could push the edge of the envelope like I think that Andor, particularly season 2, was able to do. And Tony Gilroy, by the way, saved Gareth Edwards, on Rogue One, which everybody knows. But here, Tony Gilroy is not here to come in and save the day. And Edwards and the writer that he got, David Coop, just aren't up to the task of delivering an intellectual blockbuster. Instead, what they give us is something that's lackluster. So let's do what we're here to do, and that's talk spoilers for dinos, or in this case, monsters. And hey, be sure to subscribe, because on Sunday, we're going to be talking about the box office for this movie. And I have the suspicion it's going to be a particularly interesting conversation. So we're going to talk about the dinosaurs and monsters in this movie in order of best to worst. But we're going to start, interestingly, with the DRex, who actually is both. He's the best and the worst in the movie. Actually, this is where my very interesting theory comes in. I can't wait to share this with you. All right, okay. First, I want to say, though, what are we going to do with this thing? It's big enough to bite a helicopter. Not even just grab it. Put it in its mouth. And I think it's an overpowered dinosaur. So it has the same problem that overpowered characters do in any context. And then the design is so weird. That's why I said I don't even know if I would call this a dinosaur, because it's got 6 appendages, 4 legs and 2 arms that have really long fingers. I mean, we didn't get a very good look at this thing, although here you can see a design for it. I mean, if this thing had thumbs, I wouldn't be surprised. Thumbs down to the people on the island. I guess that it can't swim because I'm not sure how they're going to keep this on the island. I mean, at some point, InGen was able to contain it until that Snickers wrapper got sucked into a vent and caused the door to break, and then the entire security system on the entire island to reboot, which required it to shut down. Now, yes, I get the reference to the original Jurassic Park, where to reboot the system that involved it having to shut down. But that was a last-minute Hail Mary. It was a workaround that was never supposed to be done. And the characters had to make the system do it through multiple steps. Here, the door jams and the computer goes, oopsie, better shut everything down so we can reboot. It doesn't even ask for a Y or N for a yes or no from a human. That seemed like a ridiculous design flaw, and it instantly took me out of the scene. I was like, who designed this? But at least for once, the careless person who causes the problem is the one who perishes instead of some poor innocent coworker. Although apparently I would say a lot of people went down that day. Also, the lab set is so impressive that I was surprised they didn't use it more. Not only in this flashback or opening sequence when it was operational, but even down the line when it had been abandoned, we spent very little time in there, which again, I was surprised with. I was like, you built it, use it, man. The DRex, okay, so here we go, all right? So the DRex to me, I was like, why did they choose that design? And the more I thought about it, it occurred to me that it looks like something out of not just an Asian horror movie, but, from the whole region, there's a lot of great stories that come out of there. But it looks like when they have a demon or a ghost, right? I was like, that actually fits. The design makes sense when you put it that way. So maybe I was thinking, wouldn't it be cool if the DRex is actually meant to, at first you just think it's this monster, but in fact it represents all the pain and the greed, that has infested this whole endeavor, where these dinos weren't allowed to rest in peace, but were resurrected viciously and aggressively and greedily so, in a Frankenstein manner. I was like, wow, that's actually kind of interesting. And maybe the movie, if it had really explored that, it would be a much better film to bring in the spiritual element along with the discussion on business versus science. I think that was fantastic, especially since they had other elements ready to go. I'm talking about the moral cost of being a mercenary, which was weighing very heavily on Scarlett Johansson and Mahershala Ali's characters. And then also Jonathan Bailey's question about why not have mercy for these experiments. So you've got all that there that all could have been tied into exploring the DRex situation. But instead, they just presented it as a giant monster, which makes Universal like InGen, that all they care about is the shock and awe and commercial value of the DRex. And they have no interest in the monster itself and what it potentially represents. I mean, I think if they'd gone that route, we'd be having a totally different conversation about this movie. I think those spiritual conversations don't bring in the same level of box office. But I think, maybe they could have found a way to have a good balancing act. I mean, I think it at least would give this movie more respect from the film community. I think that's where they wanted to go. But then I'm surprised they didn't go there. But, then you realize that David Coop is the writer and he's a hack. So that's why the best scene in the movie is a gift from beyond, from the original book written by Michael Crichton, who, of course, so tragically, passed away. T-Rex, baby! Now, we're going to talk about that amazing sequence in just a moment. But I wonder if you caught something that I did. And that's that, unlike almost all the other Jurassic movies, the T-Rex here did not come and save the day. Isn't that interesting? The T-Rex is supposed, does what it wants. Sometimes it tries to eat you. Sometimes it saves you. And that, I think, is another interesting element they've given to that, character. I mean, I don't know what the T-Rex could do against the D-Rex, except maybe, maybe talk to him. If you went with the ghost route, maybe they could put their foreheads together and bond and be like, it's going to be okay, or something like that. Maybe the T-Rex could remind the D-Rex what they were all about, what they were trying to do. It's like, don't go, that's too far. Come back with your fellow dinos, ghost spirit. But yeah, they just didn't do anything at the end with the T-Rex, which, again, breaks from the formula of the franchise. I mean, I know sometimes you don't want to be repetitive, but I think what do you think? I think the T-Rex is supposed to come back and save the day. All right, so I really think it was interesting. One of the great things about the T-Rex sequence here is that not only did it come after some humans, but we got to see it in some moments not in kill mode. Like when we first see it, it's sleeping. I've never seen a T-Rex sleep before. For some reason, I thought it would sleep like a cow standing up. Maybe it did. I don't know. I'm not a big dinosaur fan in real life outside of these movies, so I haven't studied them a whole lot. Is it accurate that they slept on their backs like a dog? But I mean, it sure was funny. And it was very clever to have the raft inflate. It had to be inflated on land, so of course it made a big noise. Wake the T-Rex up, but then cover him as it inflated. And then when they flipped the raft down, the T-Rex wasn't there. That was a great bit. That was really good. And then having the T-Rex go after the raft, phenomenal. And it adds a new element to a T-Rex chase scene. One's on land, one's in the water. But it's also reminiscent of the T-Rex going after the Jeeps in the first movie, even down to the Jeeps were multicolored, but they both had that bright yellow color. The T-Rex ends up bobbing for humans, which is hilarious. It's just visually a great scene. And you also add in the T-Rex's hesitancy, not sure what to make of the situation at first. And then it's strategizing as the situation keeps changing. And what that does brilliantly is it slows the T-Rex down. And that really allows you to get a good look at him, right? He's like, what should I do here? And you're like, ooh, think about it for a few more moments. This is great, Rexy. And then there's the pterodactyl raptor hybrid, right? That we first see take on some raptors who were about to attack the boyfriend when he was off on a bathroom break. Why did he go so far from the fire? It was ridiculous. It's like, you're on Dinosaur Island, buddy. You can just nobody's going to mind if you just go right here. Anyway, there was a cool, they're a cool design. I like them in the trailers, but there's not much more to them. And also there's another problem that they're too big because, they keep doing the same thing. We're like, oh, they can't follow the human into that space. And it gets old real quick. And yes, I get that the aisles of that convenience store at the gas station on the island were supposed to be like the kitchen scene, but that just makes it an homage instead of its own new, fresh sequence for the franchise. And what happened to the dinosaurs being smart? That was one of the greatest things in the first movie, particularly with the raptors. They're like, they don't know how to use a door handle. And the raptor was like, yes, I do. That was great. But here, they've just regressed back to being dumb monsters. The water dinosaurs just ended up being like giant sharks, although they were very deadly. It was a nice touch when Bailey said, ho, you might be out of the water, but you're not out of danger because these things... What are they? Amphibian? I forget the term that he used, but it meant walk on land. They were pretty dangerous on the water too, though. This was when Ed Skrein got eaten in the first act. That was a nice surprise. I was like, oh, wow, we're really getting down to business. Although as I said in my non-spoiler review, really only the red shirts ended up being in danger. And so after a while, that kind of made the film a little less scary because, you were like, you're a red shirt. But you knew that person was definitely going to get eaten. And then you knew anybody who wasn't a red shirt was not going to get eaten. So, again, as I said, it took away a little of the suspense. Also when they got on the beach, sure enough, one of the red shirts got eaten. That was a cool shot. I didn't even notice that dinosaur first get up and then go into the water. And then apparently, because we couldn't see it, because it was behind the stuff that they tried to save, with the life rafts. So it was a big mound. So the dinosaur came around and up behind and ate her from behind. So we just kind of saw her flailing a little bit and that's it. And I guess because they wanted to maintain that PG-13 rating. So they just had the blood in the water. And then later, when that giant pterodactyl swallows that poor red shirt whole, that was a bloodless kill. I mean, although being swallowed whole, what a way to go. Wow. I felt so bad for that dude. He would have been fine. But he stepped up and created a distraction to save ScarJo and Jonathan Bailey. Otherwise, he'd have made it out of there alive, or at least out of that scene alive. I was like, wow, what a guy. What a prince. The depiction of these giant pterodactyls, by the way, being predators the size of an F-16 was a really cool description from the trailers, but they never ended up really doing anything with that. They had some flying dinosaurs who were really big in Dominion, and that didn't really work out either. I mean, maybe there's just not a lot you can do. It remains the coolest thing when in Jurassic World they picked up that, Claire's assistant, and she got eaten. I mean, that was amazing. That continues to be the coolest thing I think they've ever done with a pterodactyl. Then, of course, Dolores. So CGI. Not only because of the CGI not blending in with the rest of the frame, but because I'm pretty sure that dinosaurs of any size didn't stand on their hind legs and eat with their front two legs. They're not hands and arms. I mean, it puts Dolores in Grogu Stitch territory rather than making her feel like a real dinosaur. Also, how can you feed a dinosaur in the wild candy? I mean, I think it would be bad for it, right? It would certainly get some kind of reaction, and I'm not even sure if it would eat it. It was crazy. It wasn't even chocolate. It was like licorice, right? I was like, I mean, does the dinosaur even have the teeth or like mechanism to eat something like that? And then she was like, I'm going to take Dolores home. And I was like, wait a minute. This movie earlier on has said that dinosaurs have been found to not be able to live outside of the equator. So you're taking Dolores to die? I'd be like, honey, we can't take Dolores because dinosaurs can only survive here. Like, by the way, speaking of the equator, Mark S. and Heli R are going to have, or Heli E, are going to have a real surprise when they get to the equator. I mean, obviously they're not going to the real equator, but if you're a Severance fan, you get that. Now let's talk about how this movie decided to say that dinosaurs, or at least original dinosaurs, suck. Every Jurassic movie to date, until now, has been about the magic and wonder of living dinosaurs. And Universal has made a lot of money off of that, not just in movies, but they have an animated TV series, they have their theme parks. But for some reason, I guess they felt they wanted to beat audiences to the punch. They're like, you can't tell us that dinosaurs are now boring, we're going to tell you. And it's just a really odd choice. Remember in the fantasy world of Onward that unicorns were so common there that they became a nuisance who ate out of trash cans? That's what they've done to dinosaurs in the real world, in the human world in this movie. Humans are tired of them, and they're just giant nuisances who have to be dealt with. So much so that people aren't interested in dinosaur exhibits anymore. Although who would want to look at dinosaur bones when you can see the real thing? I mean, it's on Bailey for not adjusting his exhibit to the way things were going. But forget people not being interested in dinosaurs. Within the film, the movie itself isn't interested in dinosaurs, spending so little time on them except for that T-Rex sequence and focusing on the monster dinosaurs instead. And it confines all the dinosaurs to the equator, specifically one area where all the governments of the world have apparently come together to make it forbidden to go there. And they all enforce it. But just apparently with like a disparaging look. Because, Mahershala Ali's character is like, again, I can get you in and out of a place you're not supposed to be. But he just had to drive there. There was no security in place. They didn't run into one checkpoint or one patrol. There's billions of people on this planet. Some people would get the idea to go there. So I would think it would need more security, or just, again, any security than it has. It has zero security. Zero. I can understand nobody being on the actual island because it's too dangerous, but there was no perimeter set up. Not to mention, what about native people on the island itself? There were human ruins there with the pterodactyl nest. So where did those people go? Could InGen maybe have cleared the island? I mean, there should at least been some. If you're going to put the native ruins from humans, you need to explain why there are no humans anymore on the island. I did something similar to that with the new Godzilla franchise, right? The people natural to that space. But again, some people are always going to be interested in dinosaurs. Even if you've created a narrative where most people couldn't care less, again, with billions of people in play, you're going to have a decent number who are interested in dinosaurs, no matter what. To hunt them, to save them, or in this case, to make money off of them. So I would think they would have to have a perimeter set up. The medicine that will stop heart attacks for everyone, that's not only, kind of a mean thing to put in the movie, right? It's like, why say that? Why even tease audiences with that? But also, it's overly complicated. They never really do anything with it, although, again, that discussion about open sourcing it. But it's just like it's a video game mission because they're like, what we really need you to do is to get a sample from, air, land, and sea. And you're like, okay, but, did you... It doesn't feel real, like a real reason to go there. And also the giant dinosaurs, speaking of having to get a sample on land, who did like a mating dance with their tails. What would be the evolutionary reason for having tails that long and wispy, except that they look beautiful? And this actually, now that I think about it, also reminds me of Asian storytelling and these kinds of, otherworldly creatures. They often have an aesthetic like this. So again, I see the direction that maybe Edwards wanted to go in, and I think it's actually a clever idea. But then he never went there. He only went there visually. He has none of the heart and messaging and stories of it. It's just so stupid not to do that. Like, what? All right, now let's talk about the human characters. Now, I'm not doing these in best to worst. Well, because all the characters were all pretty good. I don't think there were any huge discrepancies in quality. But also, we got to talk about Rupert Friend's character first because I was so glad when he got eaten because he was like a comically evil person. It was very clever that he took the gun. That was very smart. I mean, of course, we saw that shot in the trailer where he spotted it, but the fact that he took it, I thought was interesting. I mean, I would suspect that gun would be empty because the pilot would have emptied the clip before he died trying to defend himself. I don't know, maybe he only got 1 or 2 shots off. But still, Friend could use it to bluff. And I think it would have been great if maybe that had been revealed that he had just been bluffing. But it was interesting. Then, again, this movie has too many Spielberg references, but there were a lot with Friend's character. Like when the older daughter tries to radio for help or a bigger boat, right? Friend stops her. He doesn't go full Quint and destroy the radio, but he does stop her. But what he does do is when the dino hits the boat again and she falls off and grabs hold, he doesn't save her. And she then, after a few moments, does indeed fall off the boat. Suspicious of how the daughter fell off the boat, the older daughter, ScarJo tells Friend that if she finds out that he let her fall, she's going to leave him behind, which I agree with, but I don't know why ScarJo gave him a heads up. Especially as a professional mercenary, that seems like a huge tactical error. I mean, sure, have her tell another character, keep an eye on Friend. I think he might have done it intentionally. And then you'd have the suspense as to whether or not they would find Friend out or if he would find out they were onto him. He did get found out in the third act when the daughter, when they came back together because they've been separated, the mercenaries and the family, and they came back together and she said, he let me fall. And that was, so he grabs the samples and there's still, the helicopter got bitten by the DRex and taken down, but there's still a boat. So what do you know? In a Jeep, Rupert Friend has to drive towards the docks, Nedry style. That was great. But instead, he's racing the good guys to the docks to try to get to that last boat. But when the DRex is just about to eat the good guys, here comes Rupert Friend with his siren blaring. The car has like an automated response of like, oh, you're too close to stuff. And he just couldn't get it to turn off. I was so happy to hear that siren coming though, because I was like, I didn't want to see the good guys get eaten. And I didn't know how they were going to take on that DRex. Again, what are you going to do with this thing? So I was like, yeah, eat that guy. So that was great. As for the family who gets caught up in all this, again, I'm not sure how they could accidentally sail into dinosaur territory. Where was the patrol to keep that from happening? They didn't even want to be there, but they found themselves there because of a lack of a perimeter. And while I too was impressed that the boyfriend dove in after the older daughter and, put himself in danger when it counted. That was impressive. Although I felt bad that he wouldn't take the compliment. The dad was trying to do right by giving him a compliment and saying, I see what you did and I appreciate it. And I was getting annoying that the boyfriend kept being like, oh, it was nothing. Oh, I'm not a nice person. I'd be like, wait, hold up. Let's elaborate on you not being a nice person. I mean, if you would actually admit to that, I mean, I don't know. You could argue that maybe that means he is a nice person, but I could see why the dad was alarmed. And then, the boyfriend I thought was just a little too annoying and not funny enough to merit being in the movie. It's not like he was providing comedic relief. And then I thought the father's line later on about, because the boyfriend says, oh, I'm nothing. And the father took it to be that the boyfriend was self-hating because of the racism in the world and anti-immigration sentiments. And it was a powerful line, but it came out of nowhere and then it went away and never came back. It would be similar to as if when ScarJo first misses that water dinosaur, she misses the shot. If someone had turned to her and say, don't let anyone tell you that you missed that shot because you were a woman. And you'd be like, what? Mercenaries with heart. Also, I suspect, not very good. I mean, Scarlett Johansson came across great in her first meeting with Rupert Friend. I thought she handled herself really fantastic in those scenes, like a real pro when she was just in his car and the way she did the dialogue. I was loving that, right? But afterwards, particularly when they got to the tropical area, they seemed to not be very good. I didn't like the way they tried to, well, they did, but I didn't like the last minute renegotiation they did with a scam, which was Rupert Friend saw through it in an instant. We all did. But why not Friend was willing to pay more money. Why not just ask for more money up front or say, hey, it turns out it's more expensive than we thought it would be. We got to give you a new quote. I mean, I'd be reluctant to go on a mission with this group if that's how they handle things before we even set sail. So what did you think of that negotiation tactic? I mean, it's an old Hollywood trick, like they're so cool. They don't play by the rules, even with their clients. And you're like, wait a minute. The client relationship is supposed to be really important. All right, so ScarJo wants to quit being a mercenary. So the money Friend is offering is her only motivator, right? And I appreciated her candor in saying that. I thought Scarlett Johansson delivered that line really well when they were stranded on the island. And she's like, I just want to get paid and get out of here. And I was like, okay, I appreciate that. And it did make her, she delivered it in a way where you got it, but it did make her unlikable. Although again, with nobody really into dinosaurs, it feels like that's Universal's mindset as well. Just like Scarlett Johansson. They're like, let's just get our money and get out of here. And you're like, well, then why are we even here? Bailey likes dinosaurs, but I gotta tell you, it didn't really come across during the movie because he was so busy being the dinosaur police and kind of lecturing everybody all the time. It's not a fun role I think that made his character not as fun as it would have been nice to have him. And instead, nobody likes a wet blanket. And that's unfortunately what they made Jonathan Bailey's character. I like that he and ScarJo decided to open source the dino medicine at the end of the movie. But I'm not sure how they would do that. Like, you could open source the dino DNA, I guess, but doesn't Friend's company own the rights to the heart medicine that they were developing that needed the dino DNA samples? Like, Bailey must have had access to what they were developing as an advisor or a consultant, but still the company legally owns what they came up with. So even if you put it out there, the company would be in the right of suing anyone who tried to do a generic because they own the rights still. So it was a lot of talking about it, and then it was very naive to boot. So you were like, well, that's a little frustrating. Mahershala Ali's emotional hook was that his young son had died. We don't know how, we don't know when, but he died and his marriage or relationship had fallen apart as a result of it. And it seemed at the beginning of the movie like they were setting up both Scarlett Johansson and Mahershala Ali's characters to sacrifice themselves, maybe. And Ali was willing to, indeed, to protect the kids who reminded him of his own son. He had a little bit of an edge with the dad. He's like, why aren't you taking better care of your kids? And Scarlett Johansson was like, oh, he's just dealing with some stuff. I think she should have taken the father aside and told him what was going on with Mahershala Ali. Not only to have him understand where Mahershala Ali was coming from, but to impress to the father how serious the situation is. But anyway, so yeah, Mahershala Ali was willing to sacrifice himself. But I was very glad he survived, and I knew he survived. As soon as they didn't show him get eaten, as soon as they cut away, I was like, he's not dead. And he wasn't. And so while it wasn't a surprise, I was really glad that he made it. I was like, you're not really going to kill Mahershala Ali in this movie. Of all the main characters, he's not going to be the only one to die, is he? Because that's not a good look. Finally, I want to leave you with some questions. I'm very excited to hear your answers down below. So what did you think of the T-Rex not saving the day, right? Do you like the T-Rex coming in to save the day, or do you feel we've done it too many times at this point? Were ScarJo and Bailey flirting? I couldn't tell for sure. I wasn't sure. I couldn't figure out the vibe between the two of them. Maybe they just became immediate BFFs. What did you think of the dynamic between the two of them? And then, did you miss the original dinosaurs? Or are you all in on monster dinos? Are you like, forget those OG dinosaurs. Universal's right. They're old news. Give me the monster dinos. And then on that note, what are we going to do with this DRex? And what do you think of my observation that might have been trying to take an anime approach with that? Would you have liked to go down that road further? Or you don't want that in a Jurassic movie? All right, so that's my spoiler review for Jurassic World Rebirth. Share your thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.